to order. The Committee on Technology special meeting of Thursday, November 2nd, 2023. Clerk, read the roll.
Adel.
Here.
Bella.
Here.
Drake.
Here.
Bordeaux.
Here.
Gentile.
Here.
Salemi.
Here.
Taylor.
Here. Okay. Hey, Chris. Public comments relative to agenda items. Approval of the minutes of October 26, 2023. Is there a motion to adopt?
So move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Are there any additions or deletions?
No.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
Abstentions?
We're here.
One abstention. Okay.
I was in Albania.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll tell you about it.
Discussion regarding 2023 FRI-01 submittal and presentation of CDM Smith. Kelly?
Sure. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Today, you're here to discuss with staff the submission and interview of CDM Smith that occurred last week on the 26th. And this happens to be the last interview. We had interviewed 4 of the submitters starting back in June of this year and ending on the 26th of October. So this is the last staff review with the Technology Committee for those that you had chosen to review.
Okay.
Okay?
Let's start out with Smith, and they submitted, I believe, or answered, was there 14 or 15 questions relative to, were those asked by you, Scott? Those
Well, MDC staff.
staff, well,
yeah.
that's, it had a, they were done by the staff, okay?
Yes, yes,
You're the staff.
yes. Thank you.
You were part of the, process. Okay, how do you want to proceed on them, or do you just want to ask if anybody has any?
It's up to the committee. I don't know. I don't have anything else to say.
I have a couple comments. I don't know if I could add.
Yeah, sure, I'd like to.
What's it going to take to look at, based on the conversation, a 4th incinerator? I know we got permit issues and this and that, but if it wasn't for the permit issues, it seemed to me that'd be the most natural thing for us to do. And maybe we go to deep and ask them, okay, how do we get a different permit? What we got to do? It's not a pollution issue, right? It's a mass flow, mass type permit, which seems to me change it. Again, I know it's probably easier said than done, but to me, if we were going to do something, that would be the natural step to do it. In terms of making revenue and doing what we,
Yeah.
somewhat easy. I mean, it's money, but technically it's somewhat easy. We know how to do it.
Yeah. So if I may, Scott Jellison. Yeah. So I kind of bring everybody back.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
the question is, you sort of rambled on.
Okay, my question is, why don't we look at, based on the conversations, a 4th incinerator? I know permitting is an issue.
Well, I think we
But
are.
technically, what?
I think we are considering it now.
Yeah, where? I didn't know that.
Well, in 2022,
I mean, I thought it was a permit issue and we just stopped.
I think there's a permit issue, but we are in the process of evaluating and changing our existing structure for a 4th incinerator that would, and I believe that is the fluid bed incinerator.
Yeah, okay.
which is, I believe it was in 21 or 22.
Okay. My impression was the permit was just the end of that. It wasn't going any
Yeah,
farther.
if
but
I
you
may,
know.
Scott Jolson, so if you remember, we've had this discussion probably at BPW
Million
a number of
times,
times. I mentioned a number of times I was in EPA's office in February of 2020 with all of the wastewater utilities in New England. And that's really when the PFAS thing started happening, and they started banning the application of land application and landfilling. And so there was a lot of, the sky is falling with PFAS. And so we were begging EPA to really do something, make some kind of a statement that, that would alleviate the concerns. Nothing happened. The EPA said it's going to be 5 years before we even get to this to analyze PFAS. I mentioned in the past at BPW that we, right after that, in 2020, I met with Blackstone Valley, Springfield, and Narragansett Bay Commission, because they wanted to look at doing a regional incinerator, because at the time Springfield was sending all of their sludge to the MDC. And so one thing I said and have said is there's a lot of politics going on here. EPA has been trying to ban incineration since the 70s. So now you have PFAS, and now now they're kind of the SSI rule really increased dramatically the restrictions of air emissions. But what's really happening is that we've been talking about this management study of how much capacity is in New England for burning sludge. EPA, the states have all been analyzing this, and in my opinion, what's going to happen and is happening is Massachusetts and Rhode Island they're regulated by EPA, whereas we're delegated state by DEEP. I think there's politics in here where if anyone's going to get an incinerator approved through EPA or through the states, it's probably most likely going to be to a state that's shipping their sludge out of state versus giving an MDC a permit to build more incineration to have people truck their sludge to MDC, especially given the fact that the MDC, Hartford, is an environmental justice community. So I don't know what's going to happen, but my prediction is you're going to see EPA giving incinerator permits for fluidized bed type technology to Massachusetts. And then Massachusetts is not going to have to ship to New England or to Connecticut. I don't know, but I think, I don't know if Deep's on the
Is there enough
phone.
in Connecticut? Is not.
I don't see it.
Customers
We could analyze it. We could look at it.
You kept always saying people calling us all the time to bring it
Yeah,
in.
but
You don't
we
think there's enough?
can't take it because we don't have the capacity.
You heard.
But as Jameson Sinclair said from DEEP, is that if the MDC, and we've been talking about this really since 2018, if the MDC wanted to build more capacity to incinerate sludge with whatever technology that is, there's the market's out there. The question is, would DEEP give us a permit?
That's what I
And I
started the
don't see it.
conversation with. So
I
you
don't see
you
it.
don't see it.
I don't see it.
There's nothing we could do to move that forward, though.
Can we stop just 1 second? Sinclair, do you have something to add to this?
So what I will say simply is that,
Sorry, Jameson Sinclair, Mr. Sinclair.
no problem, it's all good. So what I would say simply is that to build a new incinerator, it would be subject to the new source performance standard, 40 CFR 60 LL. The first part of that is a submission to EPA and the department, which is basically a needs assessment, a needs and alternatives assessment. And the question will be, does Hartford need a new incinerator? The MDC should be familiar to some extent with that project. The existing source standard into the new source standard, and because you were an existing facility taking sludge from it was easy to make that case at that point in time. But if you're talking about taking sludge from other areas, I think Scott is correct that the analysis will be let them deal with their sludge in their location as opposed to bringing it here.
I think you made that statement at the last meeting, Mr. Sinclair. You expressed the same opinion. We got the message. Okay, so
Okay, so we're
I
not
think-
looking at an incinerator anymore.
I think that he's made it fairly clear.
So my point is, we're not looking at an incinerator anymore? You said we were looking at one, but we're not.
Oh, we are. That's a question I want to ask staff,
Okay.
because I signed a letter 2 years ago,
I
a
understand.
year and a half ago,
That's
to
2
the
years
United
ago.
States Congressman,
I understand.
saying that we were going to meet a certain standard. And I've got it in front of me, and I just wondered, because there's a $90 million number on it, but there's certain other things that were going to come along with to do this. What we're talking about, the fluid bed incinerator would require additional functions that we had to create. Am I right on that? We were going
No.
to use some of that money?
No, Chairman,
So it's the-
we've been creating a Word-to-Bill document since probably 2016. Every year we update it, and one of the things that we've been asked by the Congress is to provide us with a wish list of what you might, if you could get federal money, what would you ask for? As we've talked really since 2018 and PFAS 2020, we've been talking about the concept. I was meeting with Deep's, with Tracy and Deep staff back in 2020 about this possibility. I met with Narragansett, I met with Springfield, their concerns about their needs. And we all know in the industry that there's a massive need for incineration in New England. The question is whether or not it's going to get approved through the permitting process. And so, yes, we've been asking and hoping for, a funding that could provide us with additional abilities to build additional incineration to create more revenue stream. But the problem with it is what we're talking about, which is the regulatory requirements.
Is going through the permitting process expensive, or can we do it internally? Is that that big a
We
deal?
have to go to deep.
I understand that, but
Yeah.
in terms, I'm talking about process. I know we have to go. but it's-
The permitting process we could do ourselves.
So why don't we do it? See what happens?
Well, we could do it ourselves. I guess I've said this a number of times, that this topic about incineration and sludge, human sludge, is not a topic just for Connecticut. It's a topic for New England. And there's a lot of regulators that have control over decisions, and they're not making decisions for Hartford. They're making decisions globally for New England. And so, as Jameson said, and I have said, in my opinion, is that if incineration is to be authorized in New England, it's most likely going to be authorized to a community that has to ship it somewhere else. Now, we'd be happy, and we have said to EPA, we said to DEEP, MDC would be happy to support that effort and support the community, support Springfield, support whoever, if that was the choice, the decision. I just think that politically, Massachusetts utilities have more leverage in EPA in Boston than we do. And so I think that practically, if there's any incineration that's going to get permitted in New England, it's going to wind up being in those Massachusetts, Maine, those areas. We'd be happy to be, to
I'm
be.
with you, but based on that, we shouldn't even be talking about it.
I'm not saying no, I'm just saying you've
I mean, I haven't been
follow
here that
process.
long.
Could we
but
have,
we-
wait,
yeah.
could we have one person speaking and another
Yeah.
person speaking? Let's try to keep.
So Scott Jellison, all I'm suggesting is that we can go through a process, as Jameson mentioned. I don't know. I have no idea what the answer is going to be. I only know what I know, and I know what's going on in New England. I know the pressures that are being put on EPA Boston, which regulates all of us, in Massachusetts. Massachusetts doesn't want to pay the tipping fees that they're paying to us. I think CDM's presentation, and Tom has done this before, the tipping fees have doubled since the PFAS in 2020. They went from $250 to $500 everywhere. And so any community would say, why would I ship it to Connecticut when I can possibly get a permit for myself? Narragansett Bay Commission, this is Providence, they had an incinerator. And they didn't want to go through the effort of trying to get it to comply with the SSI rules, so they chose to they just abandoned the permit. They're probably kicking themselves now, but some utilities would rather just ship it out and not have to worry about it. But I don't know the answer because I can't dictate what Jameson or EPA are going to say. It's only my opinion of what's going on.
I think we did. We went through this. I just have a question on what we were doing and what we've said in the past. There seems to be some confusion because let's talk about how we get into this discussion according to when Scott met with us as a board, and we had our initial discussions of PFAS and how we would deal with PFAS, how the community, the state would do it, and EPA. No one wanted to deal with PFAS 2 years ago. It was PFAS, we're looking at it, having public meetings on it. EPA was to look at PFAS. The question is, how do you destroy PFAS? It's a compound that can't be broken down in wastewater treatment facilities. We had discussions through the staff with DEEP on this whole issue, and their position was, they asked us if our multi-hearth incinerators could burn at 1,000 to 1,100 degrees Fahrenheit. And that seemed to be the number that they were talking about, that PFAS could be broken down, it could be destroyed. As things progressed, 1,100 degrees centigrade was, I believe, the number that they're now talking about breaking it down, which is about, 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit. Significantly above what our existing incinerators can burn at. As a result, we began to look at this whole issue. And in looking at it, it happened that I had a discussion with a group that was talking about a different technology than multi-hearth incineration, which we have now. And we, as an organization, we're struggling with meeting the federal standards for air quality because of discharge of DOx, NOx, carbon monoxide, particulate matter. Those are the greenhouse gases that are regulated in a community on what you're discharging and how much you are to meet that standard. We worked hard. Staff did a great job. They've gotten us to a position where we're meeting that federal minimum standard. However, when you start looking around, what they're talking about, especially in the state of Connecticut, to meet our 2000 and I think it is 30 or 35 green carbon-free environment, we are looking at wind. We are looking at every kind of technology that makes sense. All of a sudden, nukes have become an acceptable issue because they provide clean, renewable energy. It does not have greenhouse gases involved with it, and that's acceptable to meet the standard that we are, as a state, trying to meet. Wind has fallen flat on its face in the last 8 months. It doesn't make, the economics has become questionable. We've seen what's happened to the project in, off of the Connecticut shoreline that was, Ørsted was involved in, and I believe Eversource was also involved. And although they've backed out of that agreement, and it doesn't look like Ørsted's going to stay around either. So it's creating a major energy problem for us. But my understanding of it, it comes down to thermal, the discharge, the ability to generate thermal energy at a heat that will destroy PFAS. That's where the CTEC issue came. They came in here, I think it was in 2020, the first time you and I and Chris met with them.
2021.
21. Also in 2021, I signed a letter in March of 2021 that was prepared for the United States Congressman relative to the issue of pursuit of funding for what is now before us as a technology that it has in here. In the letter, the need was laid out in this letter, and it's basically states that it talks about PFAS and the solution to PFAS, but more importantly, let me get back to it. The issue is, I think the letter that I signed, it's sort of all over the place here. It was, it has become, this was written as, I'm sorry. This had to do with, in 2021, in a letter, 321 to Congressman John Larson, 1501 Longworth House Office Building, Washington, D.C., concerning FY22 Interior and Environmental Community Project Funding Request. We write to strongly urge to include $2,500, $2,500,000 in FY22 Interior and Environment Appropriation Bill under state and tribal assistance grants, clean water state revolving funds to the Metropolitan District of Harford County, Connecticut, MDC, for municipal wastewater improvements to serve increasing disposal needs of the First District of Connecticut, which is outside of the existing MDC jurisdictional area, and it addresses the sludge that we're bringing in as additional sludge in our incinerators. We are providing the background and critical need for this request below. In the request, several projects are proposed, and their cost of development are online. I am most concerned with item 9-HWPCF, expanded regional sludge treatment. More specifically, the expansion would include increasing the ability to import, store, process, and incinerate biosolids. This project would evaluate current process and equipment to design upgrades required to meet future sludge treatment needs, including the installation of a new fluidized bed incinerator. Okay? It is anticipated that 2 new incinerators would supplement the capacity of the current 3 open hearth style incinerators, increasing the sludge treatment as well as providing a viable disposal for PFAS containing sludge in the region. Estimated cost construction of $90 million. So that is where we're standing in March. Now, I guess the question I have is, obviously we don't have a FBI, a fluid bled incinerator, but it was in anticipation of a fluid bed incineration that we were asking for this money. to do what you just talked about, which a week ago, Mr. Sinclair explained to us that we would have a major problem importing more sludge into an area of the MDC because of the existing technology we're using. We wouldn't be able to meet the standard of the air quality standards to import that. And you just heard what his response was. I don't know, I don't think I'm taking words out of his mouth, but so that additional revenues is something we're looking at. The greenhouse gas problem is the issue. We had a struggle to get to the federal level. That level is going to be changed. If we're going to meet our 2035 carbon-free environment in the state of Connecticut, it's going to require something new. Now, we had come in, Smith came in, and they did a pretty good job of talking about what the problems were, but they didn't propose any kind of technology. However, they did talk about fluidized bed, and they said that there's new technology with using some of the greenhouse gases to get the heat up above around 1,200 degrees, I believe, Fahrenheit is what they state in here, is the number they get up to. But they also made a statement that I was a little concerned about, and that was that there is no real number that anybody can affix to the destruction of PFAS. And I'm not sure that's the case, but 1,100 degrees centigrade is significantly larger than what they're talking about in any fluid bed technology, where they're talking, I think they said somewhere with the increase would be somewhere around 1,200 to 1,300 degrees Fahrenheit, not in the area in excess of 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit that would be the centigrade of 1,100 degrees. So I guess, Scott, the question I have is, what have you done on the other things other than fluid bed so that we would be able to receive that kind of additional sludge in? Because you say there is other
Yeah,
things
so
that we-
just remember that that's a word of bill, and we are asked to put in a wish list of all additional, anything we can ask for in 2020. In 2020, we were talking about the possibility of creating additional incineration with EPA, with DEEP. I did meet with DEEP back in that time frame. Everything that we're talking about today, they said then. You know, there's a lot of ifs. And besides the ifs, there's a major market study going on in New England. And we've talked about that. I've mentioned that 2 or 3 times. NUIAPIC, NEBRA have jointly been working with EPA to analyze what is the capacity needs for New England. So that's not even resolved yet, right? So that's still an ongoing topic. So there is presently the only, up until the initiation of this committee, you know, the practical incineration that's being approved across the country through EPA and the states is fluidized beds. That's the technology that's being approved. I think CDM mentioned a number of projects that are going on right now across the country. So that's really, if you were a community that's going to be able to be permitted to build incineration, most likely they're focused on fluidized bed. And that's really, I think CDM was pretty clear on that. You know, that is the state of the art in terms of incineration as we speak. Things may change over time with new technology, but right now that is the technology. So when we're asked to submit a wish list to EPA or to the Congress, we're relying on what's out there for technology. That's why it identifies the wish list identified the fluidized beds. But I think, Commissioner,
That's not the
Chairman,
question, excuse me.
let me, yeah, go ahead.
There are other things that we need in order for the let's assume it's fluidized bed. You say that there's other things that we have to put in place to do what we're talking about, the importation
Yeah.
of additional sludge for additional revenue.
Yeah, so as part of that $90 million, and we received $2.5 million grants as part of that very application. We were granted $2.5 million grant specifically for the, anybody who, you've been down to the plant, you've seen how we dump the sludge from a dump truck into the hopper. So that's a $26 million project, Tom, is it roughly? $26 million project. Of that 90, aside from fluidized bed, it has nothing to do with the additional fluidized bed. We need a cake receiving facility because what we have right now creates lots of odor. And so we've wanted to, and we've received the $2.5 million to start the design. Our goal is to build a cake receiving facility that we can control the odors. So that's part of that request, Bill. But that's, again, we're at a, when Congress is asking us for a wish list of how much money would you like, we're just throwing things at them as to what we could use. But that part of that is the cake receiving facility. We need that whether we build another incinerator or not. This is just solely to hit odor control at the plant as we dump that sludge. As you might recall, everybody remembers, I wasn't here, but the cake receiving facility that we have was really a secondary component of how we get sludge in. There was the storage facility that burnt down, the composting facility. So that was our primary, and this was the secondary. And when that burnt down, we've been left with the cake receiving facility. And MDC is really focused on everything we do, redundancy, redundancy, redundancy. We don't like to be reliant on one component of something. Some of our members, like Mattabassett, they just had to close down their fluidized bed for maintenance, and they only have one. So when they close down, they've got to ship it out, and we're doing what we can do to help them. But it creates a real problem when you don't have redundancy in your system.
So that's all we would need to receive additional.
No, this is not additional. This is the what we're building and designing now, the $2.5 million grant we received from that 90 request is to modify our existing cake receiving facility.
Make it more efficient.
More
Environmentally.
Yeah, regarding odor control, yes.
There's no money in that, though. That's the thing.
No, you don't make any money, but it helps the odor control issues
We've
with
got
the
some
community.
more questions from the outside, but before we do that, let me just say one other thing. One of the other areas that there's been discussion of revenue potential is the burning of hospital waste, pharmaceutical waste, things of that nature. And I inquired into the hospital people on who's doing that in Connecticut. It's not being done in Connecticut. It's being shipped out of Connecticut and at a very significant cost to the hospitals and doctors and everybody else that does. Hospital waste is hazardous waste. And I believe, if I stand corrected, Mr. St. Clair, please tell me, but I know you have your hand up and I'll get to you as soon as I finish this. That requires about 1,400 degrees centigrade, not 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a significant jump above the 1,100, gets you up to around 2,600 degrees centigrade. And that's what you need to deal with that. That, again, is one of the things that when CTEC came in with the technology and I looked at it, they for 10 years have been treating hospital waste in Europe. The question is, do they have a technology to treat solid waste? Okay. And they don't, but they say they are processing solid waste in their general process of using their technology. They also use a more sophisticated heat transfer system than we use in our heat recovery facility in the South Meadows. From the heat that we get off of our multi-hearth incinerators, we generate about 1.6 to 7 megawatts of electricity. In a gasification pyrolysis system, you would generate probably 2.5 times that electricity because the thermal capacity that they burn at is significantly above what the multi-hearth incinerator does, or any fluid bed incinerator. I think it's according to Smith, it's 1,250 degrees Fahrenheit.
1,800.
Okay, 1,800.
Yeah,
It's still significantly below
Yeah, but it's
the,
1,800.
the area of 1,100 degrees centigrade. That's 2,200 and something degrees. So all I'm saying to you is we're looking at technologies of the future that have the ability to generate more thermal capacity. When you start to deal with the issue of hydrogen and the addition of hydrogen into these processes, they significantly increase that technology because of what their capacity is to generate electricity. And electricity would be a byproduct that comes off, as it does now, at 1.7, but at a significantly higher rate of discharge. I think we use somewhere in the area of 3 megawatts or 4 megawatts down in the yard. I think it's 350,000 kilowatt hours. Doesn't that convert into almost 3.6 megawatts? Tom, I don't know, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Somewhere in that area, that's the math of it. CTEX claims they can exceed that up to close to almost 5.5 to 6 megawatts, which would more than consume our total electric capacity. That's about right now $7 to $8 million that it's costing us for the total operation. So that was my assessment when we started this committee, to look at a change, because quite frankly, environmental justice is looking, as they did, they closed down the issue of the garbage plant because of their discharge of greenhouse gases. So that's where my view was in this committee, and I thought that's what we were trying to establish. We went out to an informational process, and we did not receive anybody that was actually built a commercially operated gasification and pyrolysis thing, except CTEC until, but not specifically, at that time when we talked to them, did they have any kind of patents for biosolids. Now they have those patents according to them. Now, where they are operating, I don't know. We haven't gone that far with them. I think we should bring them back in and have further discussion and clarification on their technology and in an objective way with them, because I think, as I perceive this, I could be wrong, they seem to be the only one that's doing this outside of the country, and are trying to bring it into the United States, and I think it's a technology that makes some sense. But again, I think it needs more investigation. I think investigation above the level of our people and our staff, and I think we need some more expert evaluation of something of that nature, and that's where I am. I think Commissioner Salemi and then Mr. St. Clair, you can follow. But Buddy, do you have something to add to this? Because I think
you started to talk about what I did want to talk about. So it's about the medical waste, hospital, pharmaceutical and so forth. I think we did in this discussion and what we heard in the presentation from CDM. I've been for a long time, having been involved with this years ago. But what we heard was that pretty much what you said was that most medical waste, and then I think you've already confirmed, I know you and I talked about this, that apparently and that, and just sort of relate that somewhat to Scott. I think whether it's EPA or DEP or whatever, I think that they're looking for, states or whatever, in some places, counties, whatever, to sort of solve their own problems. And, I think that it would be, the potential for revenue has got to be extraordinary. If they're shipping it out of state now, you can almost eliminate the transportation costs because, from her. But it's a lot. So, sort of turn over mountains of cash. But I do think that we should pursue that. And, I don't want to jump the gun on the next item about an outside consultant, but really, I think that the staff to pursue this, to find out exactly how many tons of medical waste are generated in Connecticut on an annual basis, and what does it cost? And I guess in England, I think it's in London, but close to London, that CTEC described, but that these are not large. And if we can find a space for it in our operations or somewhere on our property, that we could be providing, this service, for the whole state in one location, and also, saving the significant amount of expenditures on the part of hospitals and medical labs and so forth here in Connecticut. I think it's a great possibility. I think it's certainly in our budget to dispose, and we certainly have the expertise generated over 30 years with disposing of solid waste. So I'd like to see us continue the pursuit of that idea or something like that. I'd like to see us kick that off as soon as possible. Maybe the staff can't, carry the ball all the way to the goal line in this, but they can certainly kick it off for us. And if we do, that they could certainly provide the staff with some additional help. That look, Chair, and I think I thought the presentation from CDM was great, but I think that it added a few more questions that as both you and Scott have said, that aren't answered yet. So I think we still have that opportunity to look at another potential source of significant potential source of revenue with medical pharmaceutical waste. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Sinclair.
Hi, yes, I just wanted to address a couple of points made earlier by the gentleman who said to just, go ahead and look at putting the permit applications together. And this is purely regulatory. This has nothing to do with my opinion, and I do not speak for the department in terms of what the overall decision would be. Clear that there is an environmental justice statute, and any new application that the facility would be to submit application, you'd have to go through the environmental justice process. In 2020, that environment such that if there are in a municipality, then the applicant would need to enter into a community environmental benefit agreement with that municipality. Wanted to bring that to your attention with respect to putting together the applications before you even talk of what would be in the applications. I wanted to raise that piece. The second piece that I wanted to raise is that when it comes to the applications, if they involve air permit applications, the greenhouse gas is much less of a concern for you than the fact that your facility is a major stationary source of carbon. And so from that standpoint, it is those traditional air pollutants that you need to be concerned with. And because of our status, if your project was to emit or have the potential to emit 25 feet, which is a fairly small amount, then the facility would have to go through a more rigorous air permitting process involving lots of technical analysis and even securing offsetting emissions reductions for the project. So I just want to be clear that because of what the facility is, the permitting associated with this may not be as simple as one would think for these projects. The thought was raised regarding how the incinerators you have on site are subject to one specific incinerator rule. There is a separate incinerator rule associated with hospital and medical infectious waste. So any incinerator that you build for that purpose would be subject to those rules. And they would be subject to the rules for a new source. And because we don't have any in the state, I don't really even know what the process for that would be, but I imagine it would be rigorous. There hasn't been a hospital in Connecticut ceased using the incinerators that many of them had on site, going back to when they were first built. So I just want to be clear there.
I think if you check with the hospital people, they're going out of state with it, Mr. Sinclair.
I agree. I would definitely agree that that is what's happening. That if autoclaved and otherwise inactivated can go to our municipal solid waste facilities, and some of that does. But the rest of the hazardous and infectious materials that are not autoclaved are definitely sent out of state. I would agree with that.
Commissioner, are you? Thank you, Mr. Sinclair. Commissioner Taylor, please.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman, I thought that this was a technology committee. And I thought that what we were charged with is that we were charged with surveying the marketplace, for lack of a better term or phrase, with regard to the areas that we were concerned about. And that was the disposal of waste, be it either solid, sludge, hazardous, PFAS, or whatever else. And that our primary concern was, we know basically what we have here now. But the question is, given what we think the life is going to be on this, given the regulatory environment, and given the kind of other activities that are going on in other environments, that it behooved us basically to look at this matter and to survey what's going on out there. Look back at our situation and try to determine whether or not there were directions that we needed to move in order to better our situation. One, to deal with the environmental justice issue. Two, to increase our revenues. And I think that if we don't do that, I mean, I'm a little concerned that we seem to be drifting back to the smokestacks, as I call them. And listen, they've served us well. But I just think that given the situation that we have at present, that those things are basically on a short string. And I think that just it behooves us basically to explore as carefully as we can and to understand full well that even though you're looking at a technology, if it is at a bench level and is not out there on a commercialized basis, that we have to decide whether or not we're in the risk business, and I don't think that we are. But once again, I think you have to look very carefully at other markets. I think that if you look at Europe, you get an entirely different take on what's going on in this business. Some waste facilities in Europe are located right in the center of cities. And I think that we warrant a look-see, and I think we warrant a discussion with the people who are building and who are running those things. And then for us to decide, given where we are and what they're telling us, what direction we should pursue. I think that if we don't do that, then we have been wasting our time. And I think more particularly, we are doing our community a real disservice. So I think, once again, I think that we've just got to sort out what's out there. We've had people who responded. A lot of them have fallen off the table. We've got some people who have come in here and who have said, basically, I've got this. We've taken an initial look, and we think that there's something promising there. But beyond that, you know, at least personally, I don't know. So I think that we need to get the right technical people, and I think we need to explore these things and then make a determination in light of the best evidence that we can collect and determine what the direction is that we should pursue. But we're a technology committee, and I think we should be looking at technologies and not discounting anything that doesn't cross certain thresholds. One, is it in operation somewhere? Two, is it in operation on a commercial level? And three, basically, is there enough evidence out there that warrants us taking that into consideration and looking at it within the context of the MDC here? Because we know that there's certain thresholds that we have to cross. I think that if we don't do that, then we've just wasted our time. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further discussion?
Just one more question based on the medical waste issue. Why is that any different than every other piece of waste? I know it's probably more money, but
Well,
it's all going out of state.
It's classified as hazardous.
I don't understand it, but it's all going out of state, so why do we think we can bring that in with the incineration and all that stuff that we can't bring regular stuff in? I just don't know how you deal with it. Based on everything you talked about this morning, I don't know how you deal with it any different than hauling it out of state, because we're kind of clamped up based on what Jameson said.
Well, if there's technology that dramatically reduces greenhouse gases, that changes the whole
I'm with you,
ballgame.
but would our permit allow us to bring that stuff? I thought we couldn't.
The permit's predicated on, first, you've got to go through an environmental justice evaluation. Unless you're bringing something different that's going to eliminate greenhouse gases below what the standard is right now and what we're meeting, you're not going to get any reception. one of the things that they're looking at is, listen, innovation is what drives the success of any society or anything else. And we haven't had innovation in this area in 40 years. We've been using multi-hearth incineration. With solid waste. We sat through the Smith issue, and what were they talking about for solid waste? They were talking about mass burn.
Yeah, it's probably.
I mean, that's like, you know, what century are you in?
I'm with you. They had nothing there. I was
They had
surprised.
nothing. And they had a guy talking about all these great projects they're doing. They talked about fluid bed, and they're talking about, okay, 1,450. They're saying 1,250 in here, but 1,400. It still isn't in the ballpark that changes
Not to
it.
interrupt you, but they had no recycling, no separation, which would be required, right?
Right.
He said there's no money in it, which to me, I don't know. Again, I was a little disappointed in that part.
Yeah, I mean, but what we were concentrating on and why we got into this issue was the whole question of sludge and wastewater treatment issues, because there is an innovation, at least in this country. We've scanned the country. Look at what we received. There should have been a line of people talking to us. But they've got the same basic problem. They're dealing with the technologies that are, you know, are not creative. They're not going to change. They're not changing. They're not disruptive. Put it that way. I guess it's disruptive to what exists right now. And that's what's happening in this whole society that we're dealing with. AI is going to change a whole series of that. It's disruptive. It's putting companies out of business that have been in business for 100 years, 150 years with technologies that just disrupt what's going on. It's no different than the industry we're in. And if we don't look at them and look at them closely, it's a terrible situation. The environmental justice people are saying, Hartford's an environmental justice community. We are the target. The last target that they got rid of was the solid waste facility in the South Meadows. We're now looking at how we restore that piece of property to environmental acceptance in present day time. The question is, what do we replace it to? Do we replace it to the industrial commercial that it was originally purchased under, or do we bring it back to the total residential, which would be significantly higher and higher in cost? That's what we're looking at in that South Meadows facility. And then the disposition of the existing facilities that they have, waste transfer stations and things of that nature. And the state is now looking at, through DEEP, they're looking for a solution to solid waste in the state of Connecticut. Right now, we're shipping at least 50% of it, in excess of 1 million tons a year, to Alabama, which isn't a solution. It's just a question of when it chokes you.
You think? I don't think they're looking for a solution. I don't know.
Well, they attempted it, Scott, what, 5 years ago? What, did they go through a year or two, and they came up with nothing?
Yeah, I don't know where DEEP is. I don't know if Jameson can answer that, if they're doing anything on, like, somebody mentioned that.
The legislature is.
Yeah, but is DEEP been involved in an RFI? Jameson, you were there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah.
Reach out to her directly on
Thank you.
that.
What did you say?
He's gonna reach out to Gabby. She's the one who deals with the
Oh, okay.
MSW. I don't know where DEEP is. I have no idea.
No, I'm just saying, I know where the legislature is. They're in search right now, and they're dealing with the Hartford project. That was all part of a compromise in the last session of the legislature, and a report back to the legislature January 1st, 2024, 25, and they wanted that issue resolved by 2025. And listen, I think if this committee is going to be successful, we've got to look at everything, and we've got to investigate that. I think the only one, in my opinion, that we received that was on a commercial basis and is doing something someplace else, question is what they're doing. But if they're doing solid waste, if they're doing hazardous waste, they're significantly above the temperatures that we're dealing with. And that's where we have to be at some point in time. And the more knowledge we have about it, the more we can do in terms of how we approach the whole issue of environmental justice in the community we have. I mean, you're going to see in the next couple of months people starting to raise the questions on the environmental justice part of what we're doing. And that's an issue that we at least have to say that we are looking at what exists and what would be applicable to our specific region and our specific facilities. And it's not an attack on what we've done. I think the staff has done a phenomenal job at where they're getting, but they're not getting to where we have to be with the existing technology. I mean, I think the whole question of us importing more for more revenue is a no-no, unless we can come up with a different technology that can resolve the greenhouse gases down to 0 or 2 or 3%, as they've done the proportion, as is being purported by the CTEC people when they came in. So I think I'd like to bring them back in and have further discussion with them, but I do think we need more technical help to evaluate what they're talking about and how realistic it is and what they're saying. And again, our staff is not structured to be an evaluation group at that level. They do a phenomenal job of what they're doing, well received in our community, and what they've done with the existing technology that we're using has been a great accomplishment, Scott. There's nothing that we're saying here that is something that our staff isn't doing. It's, you could be the greatest skilled workman in the world and you got bad tools, it's gonna affect what your output is. That's all I'm saying. And I think we as the district board have a policy responsibility here to ensure that we're looking at everything and taking every opportunity to improve from an environmental standpoint and as an operating standpoint what we do in our community. And this is not an attack or a criticism of our organization. I mean, look around the state. We're substantially ahead of anybody, and we should be. We're the largest wastewater treatment facility in the state of Connecticut. And we have been, and we still are, the best operation in the state of Connecticut, probably in New England. So that's all. And again, it's not a reflection of our staff at all. No one is critical of staff. We praise the staff for what they've done. Tom, you've done a phenomenal job at what you've done. The people we have done a phenomenal job. Scott has done a great job, a phenomenal job directing those things. We went through 6 weeks, 8 weeks of what we've done from our last evaluation from an outside group. We've showed we've put that in place. And my only feeling is I'd like to get someone from the outside to endorse that, because I believe it should be endorsed that that's what MDC has done. Everybody says, well, you're saying you've done a great job. We have done a great job. The issue is everybody says, well, who else says that? And I think this is the ideal time to lay out what our staff has done, what MDC has done, and compare us to everybody else. And I think you're going to see outside people, they're going to say, you got the wrong car in a wrong parking space or something like that. But overall, from a conceptual and an innovative standpoint, we really stepped above everybody else. And that's a compliment. That is not a criticism. Andy?
Mr. Chairman, should we be considering this outside consultant now or part of an RFP process going forward?
I don't know the answer to that question. I'd like staff to have some involvement in that, think about it, come back, talk to us, and get their input. I want their input,
Well, in,
because it's far above
from what?
what any of us, whether we can bring in outside to do an evaluation, because I think what Smith does point out to us, to evaluate this thing, there's a series of issues that you've got to go through. And I think that they're out in those marketplaces or companies similar to Smith. And that's basically what they came in and said to us. Guys, if you're going to do this, there's a whole bunch of evolving technologies that are happening. Not that they're an expert in every one of them, but they've got a broader perspective of that, of a greater involvement of those things. And that, I think, is something that we've got to would be the next step that we go to. I think that Commissioner Patel raised that question, Commissioner Salemi, Commissioner Curry raised that issue in a couple of the meetings we had. Not in criticism, but in looking at, what else is out there. Go ahead, Dave.
Any other comment? We were a little limited by our RFQ process, that we just kind of went out, and if anybody felt like responded. In the real world, if it was me, I would have picked out, go to you and say, hey, what are the 6 guys who really know what we want to be interested in? Go, can we do that? Go, so we did the process, nobody responded. We go find 5 or 6 people who we really want to talk to and maybe bring them in, or is that not allowed?
No, well, that would be a decision that we'd have to make, and then there'd have to be an RFP. Kelly?
No, why would it be an RFP? Can't you just, Scott goes, hey, we
spending-
went to the RFP, nobody
Spending
responded.
public money.
Scott, yeah,
We're spending public.
we're spending public money. We
Consider
don't
this
have.
public money then?
Yeah.
No, we
Yeah,
gotta
but-
pay for these guys, right?
No, I'm not saying you pay for them.
No, I think Chris, from the beginning, was right when he said to us, go out for this and let's see what we have, and then go from there.
Well,
What did you say?
Yeah, Chris Stone, the RFI process was, it wasn't my brainchild. I don't want to take credit for it. I think it's a good process, if I might. Can I finish? It was Commissioner Gentile who first suggested this, and I supported it, but it was her idea, not mine, so I want to give her the proper credit. That being said, if you want to go out and retain, which you're entitled to do, retain additional consultants or a consultant, you're going to be spending public money, so you've got to.
Well, why, I'm not sure why we're spending money.
They're not going to do it for free.
Wait a minute, no, you're missing what I'm trying to
Okay.
say. In my world,
Yep.
Pratt Whitney would call me up and say, tell us how you do this. They don't send out a big thing and hope I pick up the phone.
Yeah,
And
but
what I'm
there's-
saying is Scott knows your companies that, can we go to 5 or 6 that we think have stuff they have to offer and say, can you come and do what we just did, other than just getting a guy come and talk about dryers? That's what I'm trying to say. Now, we
We're
did the.
still- David, we're still spending public money. Pratt and Whitney doesn't spend public money, they spend their money.
But where were we spending money? I mean, just having these meetings, I guess you consider that public money?
No, not these
No
people.
one's not gonna
If you
come
have
in.
someone from the outside, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'll let you finish, I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I know you're gonna say the same thing, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
You say it better
Well, I
than I do.
apologize to you, I didn't mean to interrupt
You say it better than I do.
Not really, but you're gonna have an outside consultant, a private company, offer their services to come in and give us their take. And remember, just as you did all your research, they're gonna have to do the same thing. And I'd just be hard pressed to think that they're gonna do it,
You missed one.
nothing.
Like, this is in your white paper.
Yes.
The guy who built that plant in
You
New
read it?
Jersey, right, your white. The guy who built that plant in New Jersey.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name now, so long ago.
Yeah.
That's the guy who would bring you and say, hey, what do you got to sell us? Yeah, he's not doing you're not paying him.
What did he build?
He built his 3 incinerators in New Jersey that he calls gasification. If you read his white paper explained all about it, I can't remember what it was.
It's not the same
Pilot, yeah.
gasification that.
Well, it is, but
That
it
company
was,
that installed it, though, I can't remember, I'd have to go back.
yeah,
But you know what I'm saying, those guys seem pretty sharp, but they didn't respond to this.
well, I guess the question I asked the committee is, what are you asking a consultant to do? Like, we have to have a definition of what you want them to do. Do you want them to analyze what's been submitted to date and to review it?
I don't
And-
consider them consultants, I consider them equipment manufacturers or a supplier. That's right.
Yeah, well,
But okay, that's what,
well,
you know what, I'm
the
just saying.
challenge, we keep migrating back to gasification, but if we're talking about gasification, my white paper, this is all Federal Register, right? The information that CDM provided was from the Federal Register. It's public information. So there's only one, and I think it was, Jersey, and I think, I'm sorry, it was California, but that's pyrolysis only, not the gasification piece. They're making char, they're making charcoal. So they don't, the gasification as we've said, is got the problems with the, incineration air emissions. But I guess the question is, be clear, like, what are you asking us to do? It's very difficult to your point, Commissioner, to bring somebody in here that has a gasifier unit operating somewhere, because we just proved there's nothing in the United States. We just need to, we can do whatever the committee wants us to do. We just need to have a clear direction of what is it you're asking. That's all.
I think one of the things that I'd like to look at is the gasification and pyrolysis system that came in and talked to us, where they've provided us with operational tech, where they operate, how they operate, and what they do, so that we totally understand the representations they're making, because they're making two representations. One, that they can take care of sludge, and they have patents, they can take care of PFAS, and two, they also can take care of solid waste in some kind of a, that was before that's after we had conversations with them. They brought in the additional company, what's it, YHI or whatever it was. That's a solid waste issue. That's a different issue than the gasification and technology that would affect hazardous waste, solid waste, not solid, hazardous waste, hospital waste, things of that nature. It's the thermal level that they're burning at, that they're creating, that eliminates the GHG, the greenhouse gases. That's the stumbling block on any technology we're going to look at. If you can meet that criteria of taking those greenhouse gases emission down to 3%, you're a hero. If you can't, you're back fighting over the issue with environmental justice. Go ahead, Commissioner Taylor.
Mr. Chairman, through you, this is Commissioner Taylor. Why can't we maybe ask the engineering departments, or one of the engineering departments at one of the state universities, or maybe down at Yale, and get them involved in terms of looking at this, particularly with regard to those things that CTEC claims that it can do, and also can they discuss this matter with their counterparts in Europe? I would imagine they would have some knowledge of what's going on, because I think, from what I can tell in terms of what I've read, what I've looked at here, in an operational sense, they're in Europe. And it seems that that's where you're going to have to take a look, or you're going to have to bring somebody here to discuss that with us so that we can make some kind of determination as to whether or not there's a fit, or it doesn't work, or there are pieces of it that work.
Well, I think that might not be a bad idea, but we do know one thing. PFAS is not just talking to MDC. They're talking, from what they said when they came in, I believe it was Farmington, University of Connecticut, and they're dealing with them. So the technology is now being looked at by other people other than MDC. It would be good if we had a solid understanding of how the technology works, where it works, and validate it by people that do this for a living and evaluate these types of technologies. And I'm sure there are companies out there, as Smith says, they can have the ability to look at things like this. They're looking at it. Who else is looking at it would be something we'd have to pursue. I don't know that much about that. Scott does, I'm sure, who you would look at and bring in to get an opinion on the technology and what it's actually can do and can't do. Because our staff has raised questions about it. But let's see what an independent company that does this kind of, similar to Smith, and these people. I'd like to look at more than one person, though. I think Smith is maybe on track for what it is today, but maybe not. We'll know if we have 2 or 3 people look at it. And that's something that would be an invitation to us for informational purposes, not to hire someone to build a system for us, but to look at what we've had. We've had one real commercial group saying something.
What's the direction you would have this consultant look at, though? I mean, you can't be totally wide open. I mean, in terms of incineration or replacement incineration?
Well, I would
Basically,
want to
replacement
see,
incineration,
that
what
would
do
be a
you have?
decision we'd have to make then.
That's
I think the best way, the easiest way to do it is to try to use, as Scott raised here with the fluidized bed process of another incinerator. If we could get to the point where they could eliminate the GHG, the greenhouse gases, which seems to be the air quality issue of bringing anything in addition into Hartford, that's the way to go. If it works there, then you start looking at the rest of the incineration that we're using and what it's going to cost you to convert that technology over, and whether it would be receptive to the federal government and the state government. But I'm sure if you could meet the standards that CTEC's raising on greenhouse gases and temperatures, if that's true, that it's legitimate, I think you'd get DEEP and EPA significantly looking at something like that. Now, I'm not saying, guaranteeing that's going to happen, but at least we've gone to every extreme we can to deal what exists in the present marketplace to protect ourselves against environmental justice claims against the district. Rather than we sit here and wait for the federal government to make a decision or the state of Connecticut to make a decision, I mean, we'll be in the same position we are with solid waste. We've known for 10 years that the South Meadows plant was not only outdated, it was dangerously discharging stuff into the environment that we couldn't live with, and at an astronomical cost. We finally ended it. And that was an issue that we knew it. We ran the place for 40, 30 years, 35 years, whatever it was. Andy?
So, Mr. Chairman, so should
I'll
we
ask.
be then asking staff to come back to us with a recommendation for an evaluation of the overall results we've gotten so far, or that, and to Commissioner Taylor's point, look to seek out university assistance, in a more specialized field than we currently have? Where would you think we'd go?
Well, I think to go to a university for this is a long, involved.
He knows more than the university.
Yeah, I think our staff is they be coming to us or coming to someone else. They don't have the expertise, do they, Scott? I mean,
I
what's
think the
your
expertise out there right now in the marketplace as it relates to this issue is the CDMs of the world. CDM is part of, we've talked about.
This is their world.
Well, we've talked about this topic for a long time. It started in 2020. I just got an email here. I was trying to remember the date, and I met with Deep in May of 2020 with Tracy Babbage and her staff, talking about the possibility of market study, capacity study, additional incineration. So we've been talking about this for a long time. So EPA and NUIAPIC and NEBRA and all the other organizations, NUIA, that Tom was just announced the award, they're all looking at this new technology. They're all looking at PFAS. So there's a lot of involvement in the process. There's a lot of people out there writing white papers, not just MDC or CDM. There's lots of engineering firms involved in this topic. So in my white paper, I quoted a bunch of those studies. They're out there. So the market for, if this committee wanted to have someone look at this for us, you would look to the leaders in the engineering community that are involved in NEBRA, NUIAPIC, and they're engaged in this process, specifically in New England, because again, New England has a very, it has its own set of problems that are not different, but they're unique to the rest of the country. A lot of the, sorry, Commissioner, but a lot of the Midwest, they're dealing with, cow poop. That's one of their crises is methane gas. So they're treating. So every part of the country has their own unique problems. Our problem is in New England, we don't have a place to land apply or bury sludge because of the fear of PFAS, and that's and just the capacity problem in general. So,
Okay, that
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Salemi, Commissioner Salemi.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope I can, I'm not trying to be facetious by reminding anybody or anything, but this is I spent an entire career doing, RFIs, RFQs, RFPs, and on both sides of the table. So, I understand. So, and I heard the staff, I think through Scott, say, what is it that you want us to do? And I'm trying to this again, but I said that in these presentations, throughout these presentations, the firms that we talked to, in particular CDM and CTEC, about medical pharmaceutical waste. And I also heard them say that they didn't know how much there is in Connecticut or how much gets shipped out. I know some of it stays here. I've been involved in design and construction of hospital and pharmaceutical facilities. So some of it winds up in our waste stream, but a huge amount of it gets shipped out. So what? I don't think there's any experts on staff or among the commissioners on medical waste. So either we go to the hospital association or someone like that, just try to start to collect some information about how take disposing of it here in Connecticut, what the potential for revenue for the MDC that might be. It's certainly well within our charter to try to do something like that. So that if we can, between the staff and commissioners, kind of sort out, well, who do we ask to start to build this information? That's what I'd like to see done. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Joan.
Just to follow up.
Gentile, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To follow up on Commissioner Salemi's point, I've been struggling to wrap my head around kind of the paradigm shift between what we asked in the RFI, which was to help improve the sludge and wastewater. And we know from all the answers and the responses and the interviews that no one could come to the table with something that was proven in a commercial setting for sludge and wastewater here. And now I think what Commissioner Salemi is suggesting is really an expansion of the appetite of what types of waste we would consider. And I understand, I think it's preliminary at this point to consider using a consultant to do that legwork. That's something, before we hire a consultant to advise on that, I think we need to prove what is suspected, that there is a value proposition there. And I think to Mr. Sinclair's point earlier, if that waste, which he recognizes is currently leaving the state, and Commissioner Salemi mentioned getting something from Hartford Hospital or St. Francis Hospital to us isn't going to create a huge EJ issue, but Greenwich Hospital, Torrington Hospital, it begins to change. So I think kind of gathering that information before going through the expense of retaining a consultant to advise on that, I think that's time well spent. I volunteered to work on that.
Well, I've got my issue is we've seen a technology, you've brought a technology in that makes representations that they can do all of that. But so before we go out and start searching on what the need is, let's make sure that we've got something that will deal with it realistically, because we can go out and determine that there is a need, but not have a viable technology that will work on that. Now, we do know that CTEC does have and does do primarily hospital waste, which burns at 1400 degrees centigrade, which is above what the PFAS numbers are by anybody's representation. So if you can prove the top of the process you're going after, the thermal heat that's put out, you could technically do all of them. And the bottom line issue is, I don't want to go out and find out what the need is out there. I know there's a need for solid waste. I know there's a need for sludge. And that's is something that we do have, almost 100-year experience with. And we're experts in that area in terms of providing the service. What I'm saying is, what has been articulated to us in the only commercial representation has been CTEC. And I just want to know that we're on solid ground, that technology actually works before we go out and try to corral everything in sight and then say, well, we've got it. Everybody wants to be on board, but does it work? That's the question that's going to be asked to us. So we've seen something that they've come in with, the only ones that came in with commercial relative to sludge, commercial relative to solid waste. Two burning issues in the state and in New England. And I guess what we're saying is, if we can go out and say to our colleagues in NACWA, and we've talked I've had conversations with her, and you've got a company that's saying, guess what? We'll come in here and we'll set the system up and we'll do a pilot, which brings me into the next level of Pura. And Pura's got a situation, innovative technology process. What is it, Chris? What are the initials?
IES.
IES.
Innovative
Energy Solutions. Okay? Because that runs the whole gamut of electricity. And that's an issue where they're willing to take up the issue of a pilot and provide up to $5 million to be supportive of the people that bring it before them if they think it makes sense. So if we got a consultant that's looked at this, whether it's for hospital waste or whether it's for solid waste or whether it's for sludge, and they're on solid ground on what they're talking about from a technological standpoint, that is the combination of pyrolysis and gasification. We've seen gasification, it doesn't work. Gasification does not do what pyrolysis and gasification does. So that's all I'm saying. Do we have now someone that will say, this is what will work and this won't? And if we think so, let's bring in the pilot and let's see if it works under our conditions.
I guess the point I was trying to make is, if they are proven in the commercial market for medical waste, but we don't burn medical waste today, it's kind of the tail wagging the dog.
It's not. They're claiming that it also, they've got patents now, they're claiming. Before we talked to them in 2020, they had no patents. They weren't doing it as a specific standalone process. My understanding of reading again what they're talking about, that they do have a separate patent that will work and take care of PFAS and will function at certain temperatures that will ensure that they can do PFAS as well as deal with biosolids. Okay? If that's the case and they're willing to do a pilot at no expense to us or no commitment to us, the next step would be take it to Pura. What's it, Pura? And see if, in April, see if they will be willing to entertain this based on what they have. They have the ability to go up to $65 million in this type of risk. It's under, it comes out of your electric rates. That's what they're basically saying. Now, most of what they're doing is for distribution companies. But the key is clean energy. This would generate an enormous amount of clean energy. If they were right on what they're doing with 100 wastewater treatment facilities in the state of Connecticut, if they, 50% of them entered into it, that'd have a major impact on the electric rates in the state of Connecticut in terms of the amount of electricity that would come online that would be renewable electricity. Far more significant, quite frankly, than the whole issue that they've looked at, wind. The wind doesn't blow all the time, you know, just like sun doesn't shine all the time. So that's all I'm saying. If we can validate that these people are real by someone other with an expertise in that background and could evaluate it, I don't believe we have the ability internally to do the evaluation. So we're not wasting our time chasing someone that's claiming they'll bring in a technology that'll work. That's all I think we're at now. And that's the reason we went out for the information, to determine whether what's real and what isn't. And I think the next step we have, if we have one company that's come in and talked about the whole gamut of what's happening, and we can validate and we're comfortable with it, then you can start looking at other alternatives and then look at markets. I don't want to go out and look for a market. We know we have a market for sludge. We know we have a market for solid waste. I don't know what the other one is. I did talk to the hospital people, and they are going out of state. It's very expensive. And quite frankly, from an environmental standpoint, it's not real practical. You're trucking, again, you're doing the same thing you're doing with the solid waste. You're trucking the solid waste as far as south as Alabama. And there's no solution in that process, except a bad one. You're going to get to a point when people aren't going to allow you to receive that, or the state isn't going to allow you to transport it out of state. Then we're really going to have a problem. So that's what the legislature's struggling with right now. That's what they're struggling with in the South Meadows on how you restore it, the restoration of the property down there to a viable and usable piece of property. So that's all I got to say. I mean, yes, go ahead.
Chairman, so then is our plan of attack essentially one that we are going to retain a consultant who, in conjunction with the staff,
Right.
will examine the technology or the technologies that are before us? I would imagine that we're talking about CTEC.
That's what the objective I'm trying to purport here.
And that essentially it would be with the idea that it would be to evaluate the technology in terms of whether or not, one, it does what it says it can do, and two, whether or not there is a goodness of fit within the MDC in terms of what we perceive going forward as our activity,
Yeah.
proposed activity in this area.
Yeah, I would first like to bring them back in and have them articulate exactly what they're saying they can do. And then if we feel that that is a viable, along with our staff, is a possibility, and then we can achieve those things, then I'd like to have technical evaluation of what we do and another opinion. Not my opinion, your opinion, Scott's opinion, or or anybody, the total here, because we're one company. I'd like to get a cross-section of people that have credentials and credibility and everything else in the marketplace before I would go to Pura to try to get them involved in it and the rest of the industry that we have. Because we've talked to the people at, I can never remember the name, Nura or whatever it is, and they thought, at least in the conversation I had with the woman that was the chief executive officer there, they thought that it's something we should look at, and that she went to the point of actually making, from what I understand, appointments for CTEC with wastewater treatment people and DEEP. So, but you know, there was no response back after that situation. So,
Should we put that in the form of a motion or not? In order
well,
to
I
move
just
this
think
along?
I'd like to bring CTEC back.
Well, but I mean, essentially, what are we going to do beyond this point? Because I think unless I can hear any considerable disagreement, it would appear that we're thinking seriously about examining CTEC, taking a very careful look in conjunction and in cooperation with the staff, and at some point in time, the involvement of an outside consultant.
I think you're saying the right thing, but I would first like to look at CTEC again and make sure what they're saying.
Bring them back in. Okay.
Because they're the only one we have that's commercially hooked up. The other people that we have some kind of commercial operation didn't want to come in and discuss it with us.
Well, then I would suggest, one, that we bring CTEC back in. They do their dog and pony show
Bring 'em in.
presentation.
Bring them in again, doesn't hurt.
Okay,
doesn't
bring
cost
them in again. And then I think at that point, in conjunction
We'll look at
with staff, the outside consultant, and I would also suggest any of the associations like NACWA or anybody else that you appeared before, that we then examine, take a very careful look at the technology, and then make a determination, one, that it does what it says it can do, and two, then internally, we have to decide whether or not that fits basically with MDC. And at that point,
That's
then.
when we would
yeah,
bring in
okay.
someone to do an
Yeah, exactly.
evaluation.
And then
Commissioner Gentile, you raised your hand.
Yes, thank you. I honestly don't see anything to be gained by bringing them back in. I think they've had a lot of bites of the apple. I think in the exchange following, they've become increasingly hostile to staff. I really almost I don't want it to become this antagonistic debate. And if you want to hire a consultant, I'd rather short circuit and go right to that. They've had their day in court repeatedly here. And every time we want to engage them in more conversations, they're just more and more hostile.
Well, I don't know if they're hostile. They feel that there's been cause for that. I don't want to get into that discussion. I want them to come in and know that they're going to have to present what they have so that we definitely know what we're looking for. And because there's been criticisms of it, I want them to put on the table exactly what they're doing with the new, especially the new technologies. And also, when he came in, he was talking about, not them, when they came in, they were talking about hydrogen, which is another issue of technology that it increases dramatically the output of electricity. The nuclear people are looking at it real close and are close to doing something with it. So, you know, it's something that was raised and they didn't at that time talk about it. Now it's being talked about, so.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I guess my concern here is that even if there is, if you want to characterize it as bad blood, that's not the issue. I think essentially that we have to give staff its marching orders in terms of what we think is appropriate on a policy level for this organization. And I think that basically folks are going to have to figure it out. We're all adults here, so we should be able to figure it out. I just want to make sure that we look at this technology and we look at it very carefully, and that we make, to the best of our capabilities, a determination as to whether or not it works. And, you know, if staff has any insights, I think that we warrant listening to staff and giving them a hearing. But also, in addition, I think we warrant outside counsel on this matter. People who essentially don't have any skin in the game, okay? And I think that that's the way that we protect ourselves, because if we decide that we're going to go forward with this, whether staff likes the technology or not, if the board makes that decision, then that's what staff is going to have to live with. And I'm not saying you're going to cram it down staff's throat, but as a policy-making body, that's what we decide, based upon the best evidence, including any comments that staff has to make. I mean, we're not just going to go out there, running out there without doing anything on it. But I think that we got to move on this. I think we can't afford to dally on this. You know, I keep thinking about the automobile industry, the American automobile industry that was sort of out there and producing those big shiny new cars, and those guys in Japan all of a sudden started making those little cars, that worked and whatever else. And you see what happened to the industry. Well, that's one of the things I think that I'm really concerned about. I think this warrants our taking a careful look. And I think we just have to admit to ourselves that we got to take a look. This is a new technology, and we just have to go through and rigorously attempt to do an analysis and make a determination. That's all I would suggest, Mr. Chairman.
So, without a, can we,
No, is there a motion, now?
there's,
Well, I have I made the motion.
Is that a motion? Okay.
Yeah.
okay,
Let's read it
could you
back
give
so
us
we
the
know what it
motion?
is.
I mean, there's.
I'm
There is
sorry.
a lot of
I don't want you to have to make it up. I agree.
Look, I think the
gonna
thing
ask for the
that
motion.
I
That's-
want to do is that if we're going to make a motion, I would like for us basically to sort of shake out as a body what the form of the motion is going to be. Are we going to involve staff? Are we going to bring in a consultant? I mean, that's the,
Well, can I ask
no,
I think the first motion is to bring CTEC back in
okay.
with the expectation that we know what they're saying. Is it changed? We know what they're representing, and is that changed? I don't know. I want to know what they're saying and what they're doing. They've had changes with technology apparently and whatever else. I want to hear. The last time they were here, what, 2 months ago? I think it was. I'd like to hear exactly what the technology and what those representations are. Then we can make a motion. If we believe it at that point in time, we can make the motion to bring
Should
it
it be
outside.
specific to something though, like Commissioner Taylor said? They come in specific to something.
To discuss their technology with us.
No, but it's just, again, discuss the technology specific to maybe parameters you provide. I know their quote had stuff about what we're doing, but it should be just generally again or specific to.
No, they made a presentation to us
Right.
on sludge, on solid waste, and they never said anything about, other than we could do hospital waste in their technology, because they're doing it now. So I want to know exactly what they would represent in our specific case. What they're dealing with, what it would be.
So they know our case good enough, as far as you know, all our numbers?
Well, if they don't, they
Then
can deal with they can ask our staff
Well,
those
if I may, just,
Go ahead.
they came in
we need
before, so.
direction, as Commissioner Taylor said. We need to notify CTEQ coming in to talk about what.
Right.
Right, that's
So
what you said,
we need a
specific to
motion
what?
that says, tell us what you want us to do, and we'll do it. But we need to know what that is. We don't want to just say, come on in and talk. We want to understand, what is the committee asking us to have them represent or present?
Commissioner Salemi. Commissioner Salemi?
Thank you. If I could, drop back to what I, which is different than what sort of on the floor now is, to ask if, staff can, if they can do this without a consultant, or at least start it without a consultant, that's fine. But, we heard in this process from two of the respondents that there's a significant amount of, medical waste, generated here in Connecticut. In fact, CDM didn't have the numbers, but they did say it was significant. Well, DEP from Mr. Sinclair, that, there's some waste that is handled in Connecticut. Most of it's shipped out of the state. I'd just like to see the numbers on that. And I think our staff can in association with hospitals and pharmaceutical people, and we already accept some of the waste from all of these people, that we can, find out, just how much potential is there out there for revenue from that. There's just put those numbers together. I mean, it's part of this RFI process that we learned something from both CDM and from CTEC at some point, that there's, a potential for, disposing of medical waste here in Connecticut. If there's enough of it generated, which it seems to me that there might be, for us to take a look at it as a potential source of revenue and a potential solution to a problem for the people that generate it here. I think staff could start that, and I would. I'd appreciate if I can get an answer on that. If I have to make a motion, I will, but that's limited.
Yeah, but that's
In the RFI process.
That's what the staff can do. That's fine. We're talking about, let's understand the technologies the technology.
I understand.
No, he's asking us what we can do if we.
Can we
If
just,
I may, Mr. Chairman.
ahead.
Yeah, Commissioner Salemi, staff is happy to do that. I would offer or accept Commissioner Gentile's help in that. But, this is really simple. You pick up the phone, you call Deep, and Deep will tell you exactly who's permitted and what medical waste is leaving the state.
And what-
CDM's proposal or presentation, I know nothing about medical waste, but CDM's proposal, they indicated they just built a mass burn. They use mass burn for medical waste. I have no idea where that is, what that is. I don't know what Deep's position on mass burn of medical waste is in the state. I think I heard Jameson say that all of the existing facilities in Connecticut closed down because they didn't want to meet the standards. So I'm sure Deep has lots of information, and if Commissioner Gentile is willing with staff, we'd happy to gather that information for you if you want to do. I'd like to, again, so we don't have any conflicts with like what happened last meeting. We just have a motion on that, and we're happy to do it.
Okay, I don't have a problem. Excuse me.
I'm not sure, Mr. Gentile. I don't really know what was said about that. All I'm saying is that we had two consultants, two respondents, both CDM and CTEC mentioned, this medical waste issue in their presentations. And I think I learned that there's a possibility that, we could be part of the disposal, of medical waste if we can apply the right technology to it. All I'm just that is that, as a
Yes.
motion,
If
that's my motion. It's not. And I'm asking about the medical waste. I'm just asking, what is the market out there, and is the MDC, is it appropriate for the MDC to look into, becoming a disposal site for medical waste that can't be disposed of with the facilities that we have now? That's is that
Any
Include other
problem
waste?
with looking
Does that
at
include other
as
waste?
long as the staff is doing it.
Yeah,
I
we're
don't want to
fine.
go out and hire a
No,
consultant.
that's fine.
To look into that issue. That's something if Scott and the
Yeah, we're happy.
can do that, that's fine. We can make a motion for that.
Yes.
I think the more significant issue that I'm concerned about is the overall technology of what they're talking about. And it can do, and I want to know exactly what it can do so we as a committee understand it. And then we can talk about a consultant coming in to do an evaluation on it. I think.
I'm just, Mr. Chairman, I'm just asking in my motion, I'd like to resolve this. I'm not asking to be involved in this. I'm not asking to point to some technology that right now. I'm just asking that the staff, sort of fill in the blanks about this, with information that they can gather about medical waste here in Connecticut. And, whether or not there's an opportunity for the MDC to look into the issue and maybe become a site where they can dispose of medical waste versus sending it out of state. And Scott.
Oh, okay, go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, Commissioner Slimer, we're happy to do that, to gather that information, and we can present it at the next meeting. I would bet it's very easy to get from Deep. I'm going to ask a question of Deep. To your point, I need to ask a question of, as you know, Commissioner Salemi, he or she who puts hazardous waste in a truck and delivers it to some location is the generator. And so I would ask the question of Deep as part of this conversation: if we are to accept all this hazardous medical waste and then we treat it, however we treat it, we are now the generator of that hazardous waste. So what risk does that bring to the MDC and its member towns? But anyways, we're happy to do that. And if I may use Commissioner Gentile.
One correction in that: if we become the generator in the state, the treater, and the state allows us to do that, we're not the generator. The generator is the hospital.
No.
Because we take
the permit would be issued to us. So the point was, once we accept it and we process it, then we would, as part of our permit, we would
Right,
be
just like
responsible
solid
for it. So
waste,
if a tractor trailer flips over on the highway, you know, and there's a hazardous spill, then that's where the liability comes in. But
Yeah, I agree. Puts us in the chain. And then staff, and I said, if I have to make a motion, the motion is that staff, develop the information about medical waste in Connecticut, and whether or not that seems to be a market. There's got they got to be spending millions to ship it out of the state. So, is that something that's possible for the MDC to do if we have the right kind of disposal thing? I don't know what that is yet. I don't think anybody does. But to develop. Is there a way that we could get involved? That's what I'm asking. If somebody can just second that
Motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Amy.
Yes.
Thank you.
But
I
you
have-
have the motion.
I have the first few lines. I'll have to listen to the audio to.
Well, you gotta
Board
say, they're not gonna listen to the audio
Articulate
today,
the
so
bottom.
let's do the best you can. Is everyone clear on the motion? Let me ask you that.
I'm clear.
Okay, then you don't need to jump.
I'm not.
Scott
clear.
has to do
Fair
stuff.
enough.
I've been down this road again. You say we're clear and then everybody. Staff
Staff
to
is-
put together that.
Yes, the staff, in my understanding of Commissioner Salamy's request, the staff is going to reach out to DEEP and others within the industry, the medical industry, to determine how much hazardous medical waste is generated in the state of Connecticut and where it goes, what's the cost of it being shipped out, and whether or not there's any possibility of that being treated somewhere here in the state of Connecticut. I'd also like to understand from Jameson or from DEEP why those incinerators in those facilities were closed. So we'll gather everything we can, Commissioner Salami, and we'll bring that back to you.
Thank you. That's
Motion and seconded.
what I'm asking. I appreciate that. So, do we need to take a vote? We got a motion and a second. So,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Scott, Chris, Jesus, God almighty. Could we let the process evolve? Is it relative to the motion?
No.
It's not relative to the motion. Okay. Before us is a motion. Would the clerk please read the resolution? Well, I gotta have something.
I mean, I have the beginning of it. Salemi made a motion that staff develop information about medical waste and whether or not that seems to be a market. There's got to be a market. They got to be spending millions to ship it out of state. I need to listen
Yeah.
to the audio there.
Yes, and we're gonna. Medical waste, how much is being generated in the state of Connecticut, where it's going, what's the market for it, what hospitals are paying for tipping fees for that, where it's being processed, and I'd also like to look into what the reasons why the incinerators in those hospitals have been determined to be closed down for whatever reason, whether they just don't want to comply with permits or DEEP has said you can't do that in the state of Connecticut. I don't know. So we'll
that's a
look
great.
at
I agree.
and get back to you, okay?
Okay, is there further
Mr.
discussion?
Chairman,
Thank you.
Hold on.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, who's,
Commissioner Curry.
this is Commissioner Curry.
go ahead, Commissioner?
I would just suggest that the term used for this search would be regulated medical waste.
Sounds good.
Listen. And then it would include, hospital, pharmaceutical, testing laboratories, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I would also throw out there, just to give you an idea, I don't know about Connecticut, but New York State generates 250,000 ton a year from various medical providers.
That sounds like a.
And that's just the medical waste.
considering we were processing 1 million tons a year in Hartford, solid waste. Okay, are we comfortable with the definition of what we're going out for? It's the staff that's gonna do it? Okay.
Well, we gotta vote on that, right?
Are there, we're gonna have a vote.
Oh, yeah, you have a resolution in a second.
Gotta pass.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Passed.
That's your
There you go.
post.
Okay, second issue. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Joan.
Before we go to the next motion, I'm concerned with the impression that we're putting our thumb on the scale by bringing one and only one of the respondents in the RFI process back in to see what's changed since they made their initial. So through you, I would ask council or Kelly to opine on how that would shake out under the FAR rules.
Well, I
Kelly,
think,
you want to talk about it?
Kelly, you can talk about it, Kelly. You know the FARs better than I do. Does the FARs speak to, and I know we have, I'm sorry, for Chris Stone, District Council. I know we have an RFI process that you've approved that calls for a certain steps that you would take. You know, obviously issuing the RFI, setting up the reviewing committee, having the reviewing committee review the submissions. I will tell you, quite frankly, it was changed by de facto because it doesn't have anything in there, the RFI, about having people come in to be interviewed. Quite frankly, I checked on that; it doesn't. But we had everyone come in, and it was fair to everyone that everyone had an opportunity to interview. So you effectively changed the rules, and it's just fine. They were applied to everybody. And then if there's follow-up, the process, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kelly, the process is that there could be questions submitted, and you did that. The questions were submitted to Kelly through Kelly's office. And then if there's any additional questions that her office would have, she could submit those as well. And then you reviewed the answers to the questions. And then, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, and then the process stops. And at least in terms of interaction with the respondents. If it's the choice of the committee to modify that process to allow for one of the respondents to come back, in my opinion, at least, and Kelly, I'll let you talk in a minute, but in my opinion, all respondents should at least have the opportunity to come back. It doesn't mean they're going to come back, right? It doesn't mean you're going to be sitting here. I just want to make it clear to all the committee members. It doesn't mean we're going to go through all this. We're not starting all over again. There's a need to get, at least the sense I get, is that to bring one back on the medical waste issue. And this medical waste issue, and whatever you find out, Scott, and your staff finds out, may change the game for another respondent. Who knows, right? Depending upon what the results of what Scott's going to do. I think, quite frankly, if you're going to extend this invitation to come back to everybody, maybe we wait until, I don't know how long it's going to take for you to get back with your stuff. Just give me a time. I don't want to, how long do you think it's going to?
I have to say this before I answer your question. I don't know what you're asking me to do to bring back CTEC.
No, it's
I don't.
nothing, it's
No,
nothing
I
to do with
know. We're
CTEC.
talking about medical. Please, we're talking about medical waste. The RFI was talking about MSW. Was talking about human sludge, biosolids, and I don't know if you're asking me to bring them back to talk about that. CTEC has said at their presentation they don't do human sludge. I don't know if you want us to just bring them back to talk about MSW or to talk about our medical waste, but I can't answer that question without understanding what you want us to do.
All right. Well, Mike,
So,
if I might, Mr. Chairman, I'm not even talking about CTEC, quite frankly.
okay,
I'm talking about the concept
sure.
of having any one of the responders back for further interviews. And all I'm saying is that if you were decide to do that, whomever it is, that the fairest way to do that is, if you're going to change the rules for one, you change the rules for all, is to give everyone the opportunity, but not the requirement, not the opportunity, but not the requirement to come back. That's all.
I would have no problem to other people if they decided they didn't come in initially and wanted to come back in. But what my concern is, the only one that came in and was commercialized someplace in the world and had a technology, I want to make sure that there's for exactly what they're saying. Because if we're going to hire a consultant, I want to know we've got the real world in front of us again. And that's what the seeking of information is. And the committee, I believe, has the right, they've looked at everybody, to look closer at someone else. There's no preclusion to us in any sense that we're violating something if someone didn't come in, but someone did come in and there's still questions about what their presentation is.
I wasn't suggesting opening up the whole process to the world again.
No, but I'm just saying, I'm just asking that.
Suggesting giving the same opportunity to all of the actual responders as you want to give to one responder. That's all.
Yeah, what happens with someone that didn't respond to us?
They're not part of the invitees.
Fine.
Not on the list, so.
Who else? Commissioner Taylor.
Well, I guess the way that I view this, we're looking at regulated medical waste, for lack of a better term or phrase. That's basically what we're looking at, if I'm correct. And the staff is going to pull together the information on it.
Motion just passed, yep.
Okay. After that, then there is the issue with regard to, and I'm going to limit it to those people who came in, that we then go back to them and give them an opportunity to come back in based on the notion that you can comment upon if you appeared, comment on the ability of your technology to handle medical waste, regulated medical waste. That's the universe, basically, yeah.
Well, I'm gonna, I apologize.
No, go right ahead.
I'm not limiting what they come back on. You, as a committee, can limit what they come back on. If you based upon the last motion, if you can limit whoever comes back, the scope of the inquiry is limited to medical waste, that's fine. But that motion didn't necessarily do that, and I don't want you to think I'm doing it.
Well, I understand it, but I guess that to me was, that was the sense of Commissioner Salemi's motion, basically, was that we were looking at the medical waste.
I get that. No, I get that.
And like Scott, I guess my question here is, if you're going to look at the technology, what are the things that the technology can do? Because I don't think CTEC does just medical waste. It does a lot of things. What are the wastes? And I guess that's the thing but okay, if we're limiting it to medical waste, fine. But I just want to make sure everyone understands that.
Well, again, I think the committee would make a decision on anybody that wants to come back in. That's a supposition that it's going to happen or it's not going to happen. If it happens, they'll come back in. If it doesn't happen, it won't happen. So the bottom line issue is, my personal feeling is, and I told you, is that I believe that there's got to be, if we're going to look at a technology that makes sense, and the only one that I've seen that is commercially hooked up to do something like that is CTEC. And if CTEC, I just want to know what the representations are now that we're dealing with and the knowledge we're getting from them to hire a consultant to determine, to take it a step further.
But
And
I think they've already given us what they're.
well,
Asked and answered.
well, they've said it, but there's been criticism over what was said, or not criticism.
If you want to give everyone rebuttal opportunities, I mean, I guess that's, and their proposal stands for itself, I would think, but I'll leave that to the
It
board
can
to
go-
decide.
If, after the research, we determine there's a value proposition in evaluating adding medical waste, then I think we're ready to go to a consultant. I don't see the gain on the play having them come back in and saying the same thing, giving the same pitch, with a little bit of a twist more towards medical waste.
Well, we're limiting it to, I don't want to limit it to medical waste, because I quite frankly believe the next step, if we can, is to go to Pura and see if we can qualify on a pilot, or if someone's willing to provide a pilot still. I don't know if that's the case on the project at their expense. That was one of the representations that CTEC made. Is that still viable? Is it still real? I'd like to know that.
Well, just remember, Commissioner, Chairman, CDM had indicated in their proposal that they just built a medical waste facility in, I think it was Massachusetts, just built it. So I'm not suggesting that Connecticut's going to permit something like that, but they just built a medical waste mass burn facility. Now, whether or not that's going to get permitted in Connecticut, I'm not suggesting it would, but they both, CDM has actually built.
CDM would be able to come
Yeah,
in,
sure.
and they would be able to make requests to come in and make a representation that they had built X or Y.
Right.
That would provide us with more information. All I'm saying, as a member of this committee, I would like to know exactly what CTEC's willing to put on the table in terms of technology and everything else. I don't want to make a representation to, if we went to Pura, to try to get additional money for a pilot. That's what these things call for, pilots. It's explicit in the legislation. I just, that's all I'm saying to you. If that's the case, I'd like to have that information. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to comment on the, and you and I have talked about this, on the IES, the Innovative Energy Solutions Program through PURA. It's amazing how that, I think that bill was passed in 2017. It wasn't until 2022 or 3 that they actually got around to
Well, they amended
developing the
it. They amended
program.
it in 22.
But they didn't do anything between 2017 and 2022. But in any event, the just so we're clear, and you all have a memo that we distributed about that program. We don't know it as we sit here what, and they refer to as cycle 2. They've been through cycle 1, which is the 2023 program that you had to apply by a certain date. I think it was April of
they'll make the decision.
2023, and then you submit. You have to submit by a certain date. They presently have, I think there's about 10 proposals before PURA that they haven't decided on. They're going to decide on what, who the winners are, for lack of a better term, or who's eligible to receive reimbursement for monies that they expend. That's sometime in the end of November, early December. That's cycle 1, and that will end cycle 1. Cycle 2 is they anticipate publicizing the criteria, what they're looking for in cycle 2. We don't know what that is. We knew what it was in cycle 1, but we don't know what it's going to be in cycle 2. So any discussion of a pilot or whatever it might be with any technology, I'm not even talking about any technology that was either proposed to us or that we might want to pursue, and participating in that program is a little premature because we don't know what the scope of their inquiry or solicitation is going to be. I have no idea. I suppose because it's pure, it's going to somehow be related to energy and electricity, but they're pretty specific. I don't know if you had a chance to read the actual ask for 2023, but they're pretty specific on what they were looking for.
Well, the ask and the criteria was set in February of 2023. The response was in April.
And I understand, that's what I said, but
So it's-
2023 is done.
Yeah, I understand, but
Yeah.
the way they've been operating is, the beginning of the year, they make the criteria and what they're willing to respond to, come in and talk to us. And in April, they generally make the recommendations on who they're gonna go with
Well,
first time.
you're right, partially, I guess. They set their criteria in January right? For what they're looking for. And everyone who thinks that they can meet that criteria of what they're looking for has to apply, and I think that's the April deadline, Bill.
That's what the April
Yeah, okay.
deadline.
And then after the April deadline, they have, I think it's June 1 that they have to finish their review, and then they're deciding now. And I think my understanding from talking to people at Pure is the decisions have been made, but they just haven't been publicized
They
yet.
haven't announced.
They're looking like 2 to 3 weeks from now to do that.
They said that April, they would begin to make the determinations on what they're gonna do. So now it's actually November, so they're a little behind schedule. But they're gonna start again in January for the next cycle. I assume.
Well, aside from when they're doing what? 2023 is done. 2024 starts in January.
Mr. Chairman, can we haven't heard from Kelly yet, what her feeling was.
Thank you,
on
Andy.
the RFI. So I think I'd like to do that.
Determination on what we think you're gonna say, Ken.
Thank you, Commissioner. Kelly?
I don't disagree with, this is Kelly Shane, Chief Administrative Officer. I don't disagree with Chris. I just would say that the RFI process, and I don't have the document in front of me, I should have brought it down with me. I believe it's pretty much ended with where we are today. So I'm not sure that it's up to the committee on where you go from here.
Right, okay, that's fine. That's
Okay.
what where
You
we
said a lot clearer than I did, Kelly. Thank you.
We understand the fewer words, it's always easier to understand. Okay,
So, Mr. Chairman, so then if we wanted to bring CTEC back, I think what we'd want would be, concrete examples of their work product that we haven't necessarily gotten up to this point, so that we can investigate further if we have that product in front of us, because I don't think I've seen it yet. So I'm pretty certain. I mean, we know medical waste is certainly a proven entity with them, and that seems to be maybe the highest burn rate we might need in order to succeed with the other products we want to put into the till. But I think, and to Chris's earlier point, I also not uncomfortable with asking anybody who has a rebuttal who wants to come back to us can also do so. But I'd really like to see CTEC, because you're right. I think they're the only group that met our criteria. However, since it's a European product, I'd want to know more than what we've gotten so far.
we have a motion to that effect?
I'll make the motion.
Motion is to bring CTEC back.
Yep.
Second.
Discussion? I think we've discussed it. All those in favor of,
Motion, Andy?
Well, I was going to say, Mr. Chairman, we want to bring in CTEC first, but then if there's anyone else who now feels that with the addition of now medical waste in our criteria, that they have solution, that, their solutions should be further explored, then we could certainly open that up to them as well.
comfortable with that?
Yeah, just so long as everyone has the opportunity.
Yeah.
By the way, off the record, I don't think you're gonna get
Neither do I.
a lot of responses, but that's okay. You gotta give them the opportunity, that's
You're
all.
comfortable with
Yeah,
that?
I'm fine.
Okay.
Kelly, you all set with that?
Can I ask for a clarification on that? Because we have to ask CTEC to come back in. So what are we asking them to come back to present? I would like a little clarification on exactly, because we are outside the scope of what the RFI was. We've agreed that that process is now complete. So what exactly are we asking for them to come and speak to?
To clarify certain issues that they raised in their presentation. Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I would think that we would ask them specifically, what class of waste materials does your process deal with or handle in a manner that you state that it can? We're talking about regulated medical waste. We're talking about solid waste. We're talking about hazardous materials, PFAS. I mean, what classes of waste, of the waste stream, does your process deal with? And what proof do you have of that? What can you show that it's in operation?
And also the quality of the byproduct that they're producing, because that's a critical issue with me in terms of what they're producing as a byproduct and its value to this organization, and that's electricity. So I don't believe it's out. We're still seeking information. That's what we're here for. And I don't believe we're violating the FAR regulations on that. We're still seeking information from to make a decision on going forward.
Mr. Chairman, I didn't suggest that. I was just looking for clarification.
Okay.
I'll get it from John from the notes from the recording. And thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
Commissioner Curry? I'm I am a little concerned with the conversations and where we're headed. But the bottom line, I think we can multitask. I think the committees, you've got in regard to this, if and when you bring in a consultant, and then you can have conversations and actually be able to ask. And maybe we should ask all of those who responded to the RFI to be as true to the if solid waste, regulated medical waste, sludge, what is pertinent, and with those questions Bill raised about the byproduct that definitely in many cases can be a benefit to our ratepayers. But in the meantime, less I would hope you would consider starting to bring a consultant in rather than one step at a time. I think you need to do multi-steps at the same time. Thank you.
Commissioner Taylor.
Mr. Chairman, through you, Kelly, if we proceed down this road, what does that in any manner, shape, or form taint the next step in the process? I mean, if there's we do an RFQ or an RFP, what issues do we have to face there? And do we need to be careful, in a sense, in terms of the next steps?
Well, it's always a concern if you're going to meet with one company and you're going to talk about their technology, and you're going to then put a scope together and go out for an RFP regarding their specific technology. There's always that concern that you're writing a scope in support of one specific company. So there is that, because we have to write a scope, maybe with a consultant, so to speak, but we don't want to preclude them from being able to bid because they have an inside scoop to the RFP process, right? That's why you do an RFI, you gather the information, you put together, that's the pre-planning process for an RFP. So I agree with what you're saying, and that's why I worry about the idea that we're going down the path of creating a sole source situation where there are other contractors out there that do pyrolysis and gasification. And if we were to go forward, we would have to go out for an RFP. There's no doubt about it. It's not a sole source situation. So that is a concern. Thank you for raising that.
That's a concern, but the issue is we are not trying to make it a sole source issue. We're doing it in a public process. This isn't an executive board meeting. It's being done that the total public can perceive and understand every question we ask whoever comes in that we talk about. If we were doing this in a private meeting and we were restricting public or any other competitive alternatives, I agree with you. I think what we're doing here, and we state in there that it is not an RFP, but is in pursuit possibly of an RFP, so that anybody that was following what we're doing would have public access. There is absolutely nothing that we have said has been in an executive session or any of that nature. So we're as open as possible in consideration of a possible process that will improve what we're doing now to enhance public safety, public health, and everything else. And I don't think there's anybody that can deny that what we're doing now is not the best alternative for the people we serve. The question is, can we find the technology to make that better, and is it out there? That's what this is all about. And, whatever any suspicions or fears of what we're doing is going to poison the market, I think is overreaction. I think we've taken every precaution to ensure that whatever we're doing is being done in the public process for the public purpose, and that's what we're doing here. And I hope no one's making any representations to the contrary. And that's what you're supposed to do to make sure we don't do those things. Now,
And I'm not challenging
if
that.
there, I'm not saying you
challenging
are. I'm saying that's what you're trying to keep us on the straight and narrow. I think we're
that.
staying on
For
the
my
straight. and
opinion, I just wanted to bring that up because you were talking about a pilot project, and I just want to put
Well,
that out there that
The
we should.
reason
go
I'm
out
talking
to-
about a pilot project is that's what the innovative energy
I understand.
process talks about.
Right.
It doesn't talk about, that's basically the concept, to say, we're from Connecticut and show us.
Mhm.
So that's where we're trying to go on this thing, not the opinion of some people that it doesn't work, or it does, or it doesn't. Let's have all the knowledge. Then, if we feel comfortable, let's bring in a technical person that can ask questions that we haven't been able to ask. And then we make a decision, and maybe never make a decision about anything, but at least we've aired it all. And the public knows about it.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I just want to reiterate what Kelly's saying. We talked about an RFI process, we talked about an RFQ process. We've talked today about CTEC willing to come in and do a pilot for free. Those are the things that are making Kelly, myself, and Chris Stone nervous, because we have to go through an RFP process. We can't just decide that we're going to do a pilot with anyone. So that's her concern. But we follow a process, an open process, to make sure that, but we can't suggest to staff, to the FAR's expert, to legal, to myself, that we're going to go down a path and say, okay, we're gonna have one of these technologies do a pilot for us for free. We have to go through a process. We have to go through a bidding process. That's all. That's what we're saying.
I'm
Is
not-
that correct, Kelly?
Yeah.
Yes.
But I'm
Thank
not
you.
saying that.
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
saying to you, is that still an option that they're putting on the table? That's not an unreasonable issue for us to know that someone's willing to do that. Now, anybody else can do it too. But it's knowledge. That's all we're asking.
that's
We're
fine.
not saying that's gonna be a criteria we're gonna require if we did put an RFP out.
Yeah,
We're not even
correct.
close to that.
So
Okay.
we got a motion.
Is there a motion
We
to,
have a
you
motion.
made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Not all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed? Joan?
One opposed. Further, business. I guess we gotta say opportunity for general, discussion of consultant. I think we've
We went through
discussed that we're not gonna do that till we're further down the road, if we're down the road at all.
Please.
Chris, anything?
No.
Okay.
Oh, no.
Opportunity
You're
for
not.
general public.
No, I got the hook.
Yeah.
A long time ago.
No, no.
Item 6, opportunity for general public comment.
No, there's no public there.
Okay, commissioners request,
Commissioner Salemi, I'm sorry. He's got his hand up.
I think it's been.
oh,
up
I'm
for
sorry,
more.
Commissioner Salemi.
I think he just.
That's an old hand.
Stand down.
Forgot to put it down.
Put it down.
He forgot to put his hand down. I mean, he's still got his hand up. Is that what you said? Okay, motion to,
Wait, I have, for 7, a request for future agenda item to put the IES program,
the what?
the IES, the Innovative Energy Solutions Program, for a future agenda.
Okay, sure.
Very good.
We can include it in the next meeting. Okay, if not, is there the proper motion?
Adjourn.
Adjourned.
Excellent.